Hello. You may wonder to yourself, what's the difference between me and you? Okay? What is the difference? Well, the difference is that you go to bed at 4 a.m. I get up at 4 a.m. Okay? I know, shocker. Crazy guy does crazy things. Okay? It's like a whole ass TV show, you know? The season extends every time they hits a birthday, you know? Like the new season comes out every time a birthday hits. Every time a fucking birthday hits. Pushing 20, by the way. Look at me. Fucking look at me. Okay, I'm gonna be turning 20 this year. Alright? You know? And they're like, tax the rich, but, I don't know about that, because, well, they are rich, and you can tax them all you want, but they'll either leave, or if they do stay, all they have to do is called a little something called, inflation, and all they have to do is just, if, say, you had, like, 10% taxes, right? All they would have to do is just, well, make their workers get like 10% less money and make their least workers, 10% of them, get fired, get laid off. And then what they do is they take 10% of their products and rise that inflation, rise those prices. And then it makes it harder for poorer people to afford shit, okay? It hurts especially the newer, younger, businesses. Like the niche, small, extremely localized, like local businesses, you know? It hurts your fellow, nationalist brand. It hurts your country. It hurts immigrants, the good immigrants, the immigrants that are not hostile. They're not going to come after you for attacking you for having a different opinion, Those kind of immigrants. The ones that you would want in your country or nation. Or nation. And then they're upset when billionaires don't want to pay taxes. And now, I'm not a big fan of billionaires or trillionaires or millionaires either. But look, if you don't know the difference between a fucking 1,000, 100,000, like 0, 10, 100,000, like 100, and then there's 1,000, and then 10,000, and then 100,000, and then 1,000,000, then 1,000,000,000, then 1,000,000,000,000. If you don't know those differences, you're not very good at economics, are you? But you might go, oh, but they have enough to pay off national debt. No, the fuck they don't. Okay? If you took all the billionaires, like for the USA, for example, if you took all these billionaires, they'd make about 6 or 7 trillion. Okay? Not 67. Not 6,700 trillion, or, however numbers you want to put it. No, it would be around either 6 trillion or 7 trillion, okay? 6 to 7, whatever you want to call it. I know that's a meme, but I'm being realistic about the numbers. Okay, maybe even 5 trillion because of, them losing money in recent years, which does hurt the entire economy because they own all the big businesses that own all the big businesses, okay? They are the secret society behind the secret society, that kind of thing. They think they're so well protected, but there's a class higher up than them that is protecting them, Like, there's a class beyond the lizard people, I guess you could say. that makes them think that they rule the world when they really don't, you know? They really don't. And I know that kind of sounds like conspiracy brain, but so does everything these days. But I'm speaking in metaphors, I'm not speaking like literal lizard people here, you know? That doesn't really exist. It's more metaphorical to who's in power, you know? That kind of thing. But basically, what ends up happening is instead of fixing your issue, you just make government bigger. Even if it's politics you agree with, you're just making government bigger. 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 And bigger. That's what taxes are. They're basically just a license to say, let's make big government not small, and make not small government big. Okay? Make the bigot bigger. You know? As they say. Let the bigot take more wives. You know? But you can yell at me till the cows come home. But you gotta understand, these motherfuckers are not exactly stupid. Okay? They know the difference. Okay? And the comparison that I made with the trillions and the billionaires earlier, you might go, well, how big is our national debt? Guess what? That doesn't pay off shit. You know? That don't pay off shit. It's the 5 big businesses, and yet they don't have enough money to pay off national debt. Ain't that crazy? You know? It's about somewhere between 30 to 80 trillion dollars. Okay? A lot of money, a lot of dough. And here's the thing. No big billionaire with all their money can ever pay all of that off. You want to know why? Because the number is so fucking big that if you took all of the world's debt for a comparison, no rich person would be able to pay it all off. They could probably pay some of it off, quite a bit of it off, but no billionaire or even trillionaire could pay off that much fucking debt. That much fucking debt, man. Because that's more of a government issue than it is just there are rich people here. Because what happens when the rich people have nowhere else to go? When you tax all of them? Well, then they're going to tax these slightly less rich people. Not the multi-big billionaires, but the billionaires. You know, like the few billionaires. And then they're going to tax the multi-hundred trillion, not trillionaires. They're going to tax the millionaires. And then they're going to go smaller and smaller till they get to, the middle class. And then once especially the upper and middle class are gone, then they're going to start going to the bottom class. And then they're going to go lower and lower and lower. And you know who's getting all that money from taxes? The government. And what are they going to do with it? Well, make government bigger. Outside of that, they're pretty much useless. And they always kind of were. They never make taxes that shrink government. They always make taxes that increase government. And what's up with taxes, Always taxes, taxes, taxes. Never actually helping your society. Now, don't get me wrong. Taxes can be useful in some cases. But the way the government fucking uses it, inferior. That's what it is, Like, why are you putting inferior taxes onto poor people? The fuck did we do? All we did is just have less money. All we did is just not be a part of your government. Okay, we might be a citizen, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to treat us like fucking foreigners, okay? Alright? We'll assimilate into the fucking culture. We'll learn the dominant language. But that means you have to limit your government power and not be a fucking dick. Okay? Like, I don't know what else to tell you. And they're like, oh, then why don't you just become right-wing? Brother, they'll do the same thing, and then, oh, all of a sudden, you're in fucking basically the right-wing version of communism, okay? Like, you're not solving yourself here. The difference is that communism has daddy issues. Fascism is just communism, but instead of it being the communism that has mommy, not mommy issues, daddy issues, it has mommy issues, okay? That's what that is. And then if you have mommy and daddy issues, you know what you get? You get a fucking civil war. That's what it is to an extent. Now, I know that's kind of a oversimplified to an extent, and, you know, kind of extreme way of saying what politics are. But that's basically where I am as a now centrist. You know, I tend to lead into the get grilled into the burger zone, okay? I am in that zone, alright? Because I am more on the right-wing end, but that's only because right now, in the current system, basically anything that's not insert current now ideology, at least on the left side, because, you know, the right side has that kind of ideology too, but the left-wing version of it, they don't like people like me that were on their side, and so they're just calling us right-wing. So technically I'm right-wing, but not exactly. You know, like if this was the 1990s, a lot of the greatest Republicans of today, of my country, would probably just be a bunch of Democrats, you know, because they've gone so far this way or that way that basically it pushed everybody to the extreme right wing, even though they're not all right wing, and then everybody who was left, that stayed left, become extremely far left, you know? I mean, it hasn't gotten to the point of like civil war, but on the other hand, it's come close. The last time we were the closest to it was actually in the 1990s. You know, people try to say, oh, racism didn't exist. Brother, racism did actually exist in the 1990s. It's just back then you were allowed to acknowledge it and point it out that it was racism. You know? Back then, motherfuckers who were racist were actually racist. You know? They weren't so anti-racist that they became racist. You know? That's what the BLM movement, or Black Lives Matter movement, in 2020 became, you know? Like, it started off as like a legitimate movement that was really concerned at the time, in like 2013, 2014, and then eventually it dissolved and went passed by, and then from about 2018 to 2020, it just became basically a scam. Like, it was kind of already sketchy, kind of already a problem, but that's when it really started to show its true colors. And then 2020 happened, and then all of a sudden, they went full authoritarian mode. Full fucking dictatorship. And then guess what happened? Because of it, it got them so riled up, so crazy, that the January 6th attack happened. Okay? it was kind of a dick move, I do acknowledge that, you know? Like, it was a bit of a useless way of doing things. But, like, dog. It got to that extreme. I mean, yeah, they did destroy a lot of stuff. But the weird thing about it is once they got actually inside the White House, they didn't really do shit. You know, they did some damage, obviously. It was the fucking White House we're talking about. But, like, It wasn't like Independence Day fucking some bullshit, you know? Like, that's not what happened. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a bunch of, like, basically it was Clash of Clans, but you got like 1 star. So you did all that crazy shit just to basically do barely any damage, either than just looting yourself or spawning yourself into the White House violently. Like, what the hell, man? What the fucking hell, man? Like, this bullshit these days. Like, you can't really get anywhere. You know? Sorry about that. I was just, checking on something for a moment, and we're good at that right now. Life sucks. If you knew what the true reality was, you're probably a side character. But even if you were the main character, you probably wouldn't know that either, you know? Or if you did, who's to say that when you being the main character, it's just a really fancy way of saying you're a side character in your own story. Or in cases of you actually being the main character, what if it's more of a world building story than it is a you building story? You know, like, you don't know. You don't know. Like, it's whatever the true reality is, it wants you to discover it and figure it out yourself. You know, like, you do that for your whole entire lifetime. And most people who usually get the answer, or actually know the answer, are all dead. And even if they are alive, people still believe that they're dead, you know? Because who's gonna believe a dead person if they're not even alive? You know? That kind of thing. Because there's no human, at least to my knowledge, that is mortal. Immortal, you know? Not mortal, because obviously humans tend to be mortal. But immortal. Meaning, like, they just don't die. They don't have the capability to die. The gods are jealous of us because we can die. They can't. Okay? Black cube, whatever you want to call it. It comes through all them religions. In fact, that idea got so popular, they even made it in Star Trek and called it the Borg. You know? But it's more of like an extremist thing. It's more of like a, ooh, we discovered scary robot people. You know? Like, that's where you start to get the collectivism and the commune and the individualism just gone. You know? Like, it sounds great. It sounds good in theory, but on paper, you start to see its flaws. But some people are like, oh no, that's just, you know, it's not showing what the complete true limits of it are. Then they do it in practice, and then, people living in shitholes, living in fucking slums. That's what it turns into, because we don't have individualism. We don't have, not necessarily democracy, but it is kind of a part of it. But it's mostly freedom and liberty. Okay? You gotta liberalize. True liberalizing. Which means letting people say certain words you don't like. Letting people say certain words you do like. Letting people just say words. Letting people have freedom of religion. Not just freedom of speech, but freedom of religion. You know, freedom of expression. And they always try to hide behind, oh, but the feminism, brother. It's just sexism, but for women. That's what feminism is. Now, I'm not necessarily saying feminism might have originated that way. For all we know, they just wanted equal rights by that time. But I think what happened is, basically, people who have current day ideology or insert current thing ideology always existed, even in the most traditional society. Because, well, that's what most people did. And they were the most people. Like, they've always existed. We're just acknowledging it because of the internet, you know? Like, they were a lot harder to acknowledge because they could always hide behind tradition, you know, or hide behind being a part of the majority group. But once the internet exposed them, and we started to realize, hey, these people do in fact actually exist, who's to say that we can't stop them? You know, who's to say that maybe we can just not listen to those people, you know? But it does make you think. It does make you think. All that I ask is, regardless if you agree or disagree with what I said in this video, do your own research, you know? Make your own opinions, make your own thoughts, regardless if that means, you know, it's something you agree or disagree with yourself, or if it's something that, you know, maybe everybody has, maybe nobody has, you know, in terms of thought or opinion, or even just fact, even, if that's the case. But not, you know, not everybody has facts. But everybody has thoughts and opinions. But you have to come to your own conclusions and see where the result is. Okay? What is the result of using that thought, using that logic? You know, like if you did something that says, hey, I agree with whatever it may be, or I disagree with whatever it may be, or I'm neutral about it. Are you really neutral about it? You know? Are you really thinking what you want to think? Because here's the truth. If you want to wake up, you have to, you know, wake up. You have to actually wake the fuck up. But I can only tell you for so long. I can only tell you for so fucking long. I could go on for, you know, till the end of fucking time, telling you, if there is such a thing as the end of time, that you gotta do these things, and you gotta do these things this exact way, at this exact time. But it's not gonna work out for you if you don't actually, you know, do them. You know? Because how are you gonna be awake if you're not even aware that you're sleeping in the first place? You know? Like, if you're in a lucid dream that's so good, why would you want to wake up? Well, sometimes, even if it's fucking, you know, and I'm talking in metaphors here, even if it's fucking, like, absolute, you know, world destruction, or absolute, like, it's painful, boring, lame, disgusting, you know, just evil in every way, well, at least you'll know the truth. You know? Oh, excuse me there. At least you know the truth. And I'm talking in metaphors because, at least online, you can acknowledge you're in a literal matrix when you're online. You know? Like, offline, not really, per se. Because, well, that's up for you to judge. But on digital, in the digital world, that's definitely a reality. You know? Really does make you think. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much the end of the video. So whatever thoughts or opinions, that's up to you to make, not me. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I shall see you later. Or probably not. Anyways, bye.